Actor and director Rob Reiner and his wife Michelle were just found murdered at their LA home just this weekend. The suspect who's been arrested is their son, Nick. Today, we're going to take a look at Nick's multiple stints in rehab, what we know about his mental health history, and what could have possibly led to him murdering his parents. Let's get into it. Just a reminder, I'm not diagnosing anyone. I am just basing my analysis on anything that's available in the public domain. Let's start out with this New York Post article. Rob Reiner feared his son Nick's mental health was deteriorating before grisly slashings. Nick was thought to be using drugs again, and his parents feared for his mental state over the past few months. A family friend who has known Nick his entire life told the Post. Rob had been telling people that they're scared for Nick and scared that his mental state was deteriorating. These poor people did everything to help this kid. The tension between Nick and his parents apparently boiled over just 24 hours before Rob and Michelle were reportedly found with their throats slashed. Rob and Nick got into some sort of a fight at a holiday party hosted by Conan O'Brien. Nick was supposedly off drugs, but then began hearing he was not so much off of them, a source said. According to the insider, Rob and Michelle spared no expense in their attempt to rehabilitate Nick, sending him to countless facilities over the years. Nick's struggles with substance abuse were severe. The source claims at his lowest point, he was badly addicted to a combo of opiates and heroin. Nick had entered rehab for the first time at age 15 and up until the age of 22 was in rehab about 18 times. Shortly after his last stint in rehab, he became clean and sober and was working on a semi-autobiographical script that would become a movie called Being Charlie, which was partly based on his struggles living in the shadow of a famous father and grandfather. According to People magazine, Rob Reiner and his son Nick got in a big fight at Conan O'Brien's Christmas party just hours before the murders. So apparently at the Christmas party, Nick and Rob got into a very loud argument. One of the sources tells people Nick was freaking everyone out, acting crazy, kept asking people if they were famous. Both Rob and Michelle then reportedly left the party after the argument. And I mean, this is within less than 24 hours of their murder. Nick had previously spoken about his struggles with addiction and homelessness beginning in his teens. As his addiction escalated, Nick said he drifted farther from home and spent significant stretches homeless in multiple states. According to celebrity columnist Rob Shooter, Conan O'Brien haunted by guilt after Rob and Michelle's murders. Conan O'Brien's devastated and consumed with guilt following the shocking murders. Insiders tell me that Conan is blaming himself after witnessing a heated argument between Rob, Michelle, and Nick. He keeps thinking, what if I'd stepped in? What if I'd pulled Rob aside or shut it down? A source says he feels like maybe he could have changed the course of what happened. According to sources, the confrontation at the party was very loud, with raised voices echoing across the room. Nick was found near USC a few hours after his parents' bodies were discovered in their home, and he was found at around 9:15 p.m. on Sunday. There's no mention whether he was alone or with someone else. There's also no mention if there was an accomplice. Right now, he's currently being held without bond and he's set to appear in court on Tuesday, December 16th. Now, given that Nick lived a fairly seemingly private life, there's not any social media posts out there. We don't really know what was going on in his life the past decade since the movie Being Charlie was released. Based on the reportings from People magazine, that sources who attended the Conan O'Brien Christmas party just the night before, where Nick was, quote, freaking everyone out, acting crazy. He kept asking people if they were famous. It does seem like he may have had a dissociative episode. Again, there's just such limited information on Nick, who he really was in his personal life. I don't think he had a social media presence. So part of this is we'll just have to wait until we can gather more information. According to page 6, Rob and Michelle's yoga instructor, Alana Zabel, had given them an interview where she recalls Nick at a very young age in the early 2000s. Nick was born in 93, so maybe he was, 10, around the age of 10, that he interrupted pretty much all of their yoga sessions. She said that the disruptions lasted about 20 minutes or so and that the outbursts were intense and involved a lot of screaming. And this is a photo of him at the Wynn Las Vegas from last year. And I mean, you could just see his affect is, I mean, he appears very flat, very morose, and very closed off, just here having his hands in his lap like that. According to Alana, Rob and Michelle had asked her to do yoga with Nick privately as a way to help him calm his heightened nervous system. And she agreed, describing Nick as this little boy with behavioral issues who is always upsetting everyone but trying to figure it out. Boys are wild in general, just not Nicky, she said. And so I would always focus on the physicality. Let me teach him how to do a handstand. Let me teach him how to do crow so he can feel the sense of accomplishment in his body. I really focused our sessions on trying to exhaust him so that he could get into a place of connection and mindfulness, but I rarely got there because he was just inexhaustible. And she recalls Nick being unusually energetic and wondered whether ADHD was ever at play. She also mentions that kind of energy requires a lot of disarming, but I know a lot of kids who were of that intensity who turned out to be well adjusted adults. And then here he is at the most recent premiere of the sequel to the original Spinal Tap movie. And actually, the rest of his family members are cut out of this picture, but he's at the premiere. This was back in September. And I mean, again, you see that same kind of very flat, detached affect, a bit aloof. One thing that stuck out to me here was his hand puffiness and discoloration. And sometimes you could see that with addicts who have injected drugs intravenously. And so, again, there has been recent speculation that he relapsed, but at this time, we don't know. There's many reasons as to why someone may begin using substances and get addicted to them. What we do know is he had been in countless cycles of rehab, most of which didn't work. There was clearly a period of tough love within the family in regards to him being out on his own for a few years, and him being homeless. He was living across the country. Nick did speak about his stints in rehab, addiction, and homelessness in a 2016 interview on the Dopey podcast. He revealed that he had turned to drugs partially to cope with being raised by such an acclaimed family, referring to his father, Rob, and paternal grandfather, Carl. After podcast host David Mannheim said he started using drugs to burn off his privilege, Nick said, "It's so interesting you brought that up because that's what was my experience. I never wanted to identify with my father with money or being judged on any of that stuff. I don't care. It's never done it for me to brag about that stuff. It makes me uncomfortable." That's interesting because this interview is from 9 years ago, and just the night before the murders at Conan O'Brien's party, he's running around asking everyone if they're famous. And ironically, he's saying here that it makes him uncomfortable when he was the one making people feel uncomfortable. Nick also previously talked about finding companionship in drug dealers and addicts that he met in rehab. I had relationships where they'd say, "Oh, those are not real relationships because they're based on drugs." I befriended so many people that I never think I'd have ever have a conversation with in rehab. And for all the negative that I think it did to me, it also exposed me to a larger demographic of people. And later in that podcast, the podcast host, David Mannheim, expressed his admiration for Nick's father, saying how Rob's movies made his life better. It's a paradox, Nick said. You're seeing how they made everyone happy, and then I'm the one who that makes everyone unhappy. He added, the question I love to hear is, you come from a background like this. How could you ever get into drugs? It's like, well, gee, I don't even know where to start. So it's interesting because he still is keeping things vague. He's not mentioning any type of abuse or neglect, mainly the fact of, again, living in a famous father's father and grandfather's shadow. And it's interesting, this comment on, I'm the one that makes everyone unhappy. To me, that's an indicator of an incredibly strong negative core belief of I'm unlovable. And I don't know if he gave himself that a label. I don't know if he was known as the black sheep in his family, but definitely you see here feeling distant and separate and on a certain level rejected or unaccepted by his family. In a 2016 interview with People, Nick shared that he was first sent to rehab around his 15th birthday and refused to go back multiple times after that. If I wanted to do it my way and not go to the programs they were suggesting, then I had to be homeless. So basically, here it sounds like his parents were giving him an ultimatum. Hey, either you're participating in the programs to get clean or you can't live here, right? Which is a form of tough love. Nick said that he ended up having 17 stays in rehab amid some stints of homelessness. I was homeless in Maine. I was homeless in New Jersey. I was homeless in Texas. I spent nights on the street. I spent weeks on the street. It was not fun. That made me who I am now, having to deal with that stuff. Now I've been home for a really long time and I've sort of gotten acclimated back to being in Los Angeles and being around my family, but there were a lot of dark years. So, once again, I'm not seeing where he details in any way how he got sober, if he's attending groups, if he had a sponsor, if he was attending therapy, if he was ever prescribed any medications. W- We're just kind of left thinking, okay, he was really down and alone and on the streets and addicted. And then where's the jump between coming back to LA and his family greeting him with open arms? I mean, that would be an indicator he re-enrolled in some type of rehab. And then Nick says he ultimately quit heroin after a practical realization. Quote, I got sick of doing that. I come from a nice family. I'm not supposed to be out there on the streets and in homeless shelters doing all these things. Again, there's so many pieces missing here. You don't just come off of a heavy opioid like that with just an epiphany, a practical realization. I'm wondering what exactly would be the barrier for him to share that with everyone. How he did get sober, how he did get clean. If you know anyone who's struggling with substance abuse, please take a look at my pinned comment down below for some resources. I'll keep following this story and updating you all on any new developments that we have or information on Nick's mental health, including any clinical diagnoses that may be revealed. Take care, and I'll see you on the next one.